There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are rivers and oceans enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just the song, but forevermore. We don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just the song, but forevermore. No, not just the song, but just for I give to you and you give to me true love, so on and on it will always be true love, for you and I are an angel on high with nothing to do but to give to you and to give to me love forever God's promising skies, petals on a boat drifting. Imagine this in wonder of eyes, and this is my beloved. Strange spice from the south, honey through the gold sifting. Imagine this on budding ground, and this is my beloved. And when she speaks, and when she talks to me, music, mystery. And when she moves, and when she walks with me, paradise comes suddenly. All that can stand, all that can stand, all that for the heart's lifted.
us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the hard night. Let us be guided in our time together to celebrate the fun and the depth of the mystery of love. Held in that mystery, we gather, gaze in wonder, and celebrate. Welcome. Each year for the last 4 years, we have honored and marked Evolution Sunday, the Sunday closest to Charles Darwin's birthday, by exploring the connections between science and religion, the ways that we, as people of faith who also value reason, appreciate and honor the theory of evolution as part of our spiritual heritage as well as our intellectual one. This being Valentine's Day as well, I had a little challenge before me. And so, unsure of how to respond to that challenge, I thought poetry is how you respond to a challenge on Valentine's Day. So our opening words. Roses are red, violets are blue. I can't live without love, and neither can you. We know that it's true, but can't fathom it through without heaps of help from science's view. Scripture was nice, I knew, but could not suffice to give the heart its full due. I was wrong, it turns out, and before we are through, I'll tell you just how much it's true. I mentioned earlier being challenged by weaving together evolution and Valentine's Day this morning. The challenge not being that I didn't want to look into the psychobiology of love, but rather that Valentine's Day is a holiday that I generally despise. The choir's working on me this morning. I have have a deep disdain for the way our culture makes an idol of romantic love. Not mature, lasting love, but the immediate gratification, objectifying, high drama-inducing love that sells tabloids and soap operas and pop songs. I frankly had enough of our cultural fantasy of love that keeps people in abusive relationships. I can't make sense of the distance between our norm of monogamy and our fascination with adultery, both factual and fictional. Whatever the Valentine's Day version of the Grinch is, that's me. But it's not because I'm not a devoted fan and student of love, but because I think it matters deeply how we form and fashion our ideas and our ideals of love. We need love to guide us. It's the only thing that can save us. Paul wrote in his first letter to the Corinthians a beautiful statement of what love could and could not offer. He spoke to a community at the time that was at war internally. It was frantic over how they would survive, and they were questioning the faith and ideals that were at their center because they were so hard to live in the world. He spoke to a community not unlike our own. That reading is the single most popular reading at weddings, both religious and secular, because, of course, Paul was onto something. But it's also become so commonly used that it's easy to hear the first strains and go, oh yeah, the gong and the cymbals, I know all that. Like a pop song, it has a familiar cadence. Unlike pop songs, it has an eternal message we desperately need to hear. Anticipating my own need for a refuge from the nauseating expressions of love in Valentine's advertising, and aware of the overuse of every scripture related to love, I thought surely there must be some discoveries of evolutionary biology that could help us understand love. Some new insights into the necessity and significance of our capacity to connect and connect deeply. Science must have some things to confirm what faith traditions have known and lived for centuries. Our human survival depends on love. What I found was that all they had managed to do so far was confirm Paul's elegant piece of scripture, but in some pretty profound ways. We've known for millennia that biological mating is intrinsic to our survival. As a species, like all species, we must reproduce or die. But as far as we know, we're unique among species in having the capacity and inclination to choose a mate based not just on biological urges, but also on something deeper. In fact, many of us, it turns out, are wired to choose mates with whom we will not biologically reproduce at all. While we may face the temptations of the flesh like the animals that we are, the pull of love that's not about mating, but about emotional connection, is one of the greatest mysteries of human existence. In a book called A General Theory of Love, 3 psychiatrists attempt to understand the psychobiology of love. They begin by pointing out the inherent difficulty of studying love scientifically. Science depends first and foremost on reason, and you don't have to be a scientist to deduce that love defies reason. So love, for centuries, was left to the poets, considered something that eventually might be fully explained, and if not explainable, then it must not be really worthwhile. In their words, long before science existed, sharp-eyed men and women told each other stories about how people are. Stories that have never lost their power to enchant and instruct. The purpose of using science to investigate human nature is not to replace those stories, but to augment and deepen them. Robert Frost once wrote that too many poets deluded themselves by thinking the mind is dangerous and must be left out. That principle is mirrored in the study of the brain, where too many experts, out of plain fear, avoid mentioning love. We think the heart is dangerous and must be left in, they write. The proven and the unprovable, the heart and the brain, like charged particles of opposing polarity, exert their pulls in different directions. Where they're brought together, within that place of radiant intersection, love begins to reveal itself. At the risk of oversimplifying, I'll try to summarize that place of radiant intersection they begin to theorize about. Love, most simply described as our ability to connect with others in ways that comfort us, shape us, allow us to thrive, belongs to an area of the brain that developed with mammals, the limbic brain. It allowed the first mammals to regulate their inner world of the body in relationship to the outer world of other beings and nature. Mammals not only biologically reproduce differently than reptiles, giving birth to babies instead of eggs, but they also have the ability and the need to connect with their offspring, to care for one another. This is the part of the brain that all mammals share, and where the seeds of our emotional life reside. The part of our brain devoted to speech and abstract thinking, the part that gives us the ability to choose one thing over another by a process of logic, the part that's uniquely well developed in humans, is the neocortex. It lies over the limbic brain, and as well developed as it is, it's still in constant interaction with and subject to the urges of the reptilian and the limbic brain. We can't fully reason our way out of fear or talk ourselves into sexual attraction. Biologically speaking, all of the parts of our brains consist of particles called neurons that transmit electrical signals. And they do this generally in loops that carry information back and forth from different parts of our bodies to make ourselves function. The stomach needs fuel and sends a signal to the brain that says it's time to eat. The brain receives the signal and passes it on into action. Food is ingested, the stomach is satisfied. But in the case of our emotions, especially that attachment center that's responsible for love, that thing that makes it possible for us to care for one another, that loop cannot be completed inside us. Crucial parts of who we are and how we understand the world cannot come to be without the guidance and care of people outside of us. Infants rely entirely on their caregivers for cues as to how to respond to the world. Anyone who's raised a child has seen this. When they start to take those first tentative steps and tumble and inevitably fall right on their bum, that moment of shock, they look up at us and they look for a cue as to how to respond. What did this mean? This was entirely unexpected. And if the adults around them respond with horror and a big gasp, they begin to cry. If they respond with a chuckle and a whoopsie daisy, the child starts to chuckle as well, knowing that they're okay, really. They've just taken a little spill, one of many that might befall them in life. For better or worse, the lessons that we get about the world from those around us shape our emotional landscape and the responses that we will create for life. Now, that's not too far from what non-biologically based psychology knew for some time. But the earliest experience that we have of those connections shape the patterns that our neurons will travel, far below the level of our conscious choice, for years to come. Those relational patterns that we witness early in life then go on to shape who we will choose later on. If we choose a funny Valentine, it probably means that we saw something in that funny Valentine that mirrored the early relationships we had with those who cared for us. A whole genre of country western music is a tribute to this fact as well. I love you, you leave me, I don't like you that much anyway now that I think about it. Why were you so wrong? How dare you? I'm left here with my dog and my guitar until someone else just like you comes along and I repeat the pattern all over again. I may exact a clever vengeance by writing a song about it, but on my own, I'm helpless to reset that pattern that was set in childhood. It takes a lot of hard work to change those patterns, but they can, in fact, be changed. It's not just psychotropic drugs that can change our chemistry, it turns out, but human connection can, too. A deep therapeutic relationship, a nurturing friendship, a network of support that gives our brains new input over time can change our neurobiology so that we learn to seek out healthier relationships, become more secure in who we are, and more functional in the world around us. That neocortex, though, is not just, so the limbic brain is the one that takes care of the emotions. The neocortex says we can figure our way out of this. And that neocortex is not just the part of the brain devoted to logic and language. It also allows us to plan ahead, to develop hopes for the future that reach beyond the present reality. The limbic system needs the neocortex to help it out of despair when those connections with other people aren't forthcoming. But the neocortex also needs a strong limbic system. It needs strong emotional development in order to truly make smart choices and build life-sustaining human systems. At the present time, in our culture, I would say we're basing too many of those higher-level decisions on poorly formed emotional information. We're systemically replacing the connections that are found in deep and sustaining love with the pursuit of wealth, physical beauty, youthful appearance, and all of the other shifting, elusive markers of status. Which brings me back to this morning's reading from St. Paul. It's not romantic love that Paul refers to at all. I struggle to say this to the couples that choose it for their weddings. He's talking about the love that forms and patterns us into communities that can build and sustain a greater kind of love in the world. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels but have not love, I am like a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. The love that will help us evolve into a truer expression of the best that's possible for us humanly is the one that this scripture holds out hope for. Paul was addressing a fledgling community of Jesus followers in Corinth who were having some trouble getting along, as many communities over many times still continue to do, and reminds them, love is patient, love is kind. The authors of that general theory of love, once again, say a culture wise in love's ways would understand a relationship's demand for time. It would teach the difference between in love and loving. It would impart to its members the mutuality on which their lives depend. A culture versed in the workings of emotional life would encourage and promote the activities that sustain health, togetherness with one's partner and children, homes, families, and communities of connectedness. Such a society would guide its inhabitants to the joy that can be found at the heart of attachment, what Bertrand Russell called, in mystic miniature, the prefiguring vision of the heaven that saints and poets have imagined. Paul was pointing his Christian community to a heaven into which they would be welcomed through the redeeming love of Jesus. But our human destiny calls us into a redeeming love that we are uniquely wired for and uniquely capable of providing and building in the world. Standing on the side of love in our time and culture means standing firmly in the face of our connections with one another, both intimate and global. In a culture in which envy, boasting, arrogance, and rudeness are the center of our entertainment, we need to remind ourselves that love is none of those things. When we're told that in order to get ahead, to achieve our dreams, we must insist on our own way at the expense of every relationship, and that if we don't get it, we ought to be irritated and resentful, we're reminded that that is not the way of love. Love rejoices in the truth, even when it's hard to speak. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. In a world of instant gratification and the celebration of power above all, We will look foolish for honoring, abiding love, love that unfolds over time, love that involves giving even without expectation of reward. But this love never ends. The words of humans proclaiming anything will end. There are and always will be limits to our knowledge. But there is a foundation deeper than any earthly well, a home in the eternal that we might find as we come face to face with the love that forms us, that gives us life, and that can save us all. This is urgent work, my friends. I'm no biologist, I'm no specialist in evolution, but I can tell you that I believe that just as individuals are formed and shaped by the connections in a feedback loop, our communities are too. As we forge our connections with one another, we tell each other who we are and who we can be, who our best selves might become. If we do this as a community, it's our obligation also to reach beyond our community, to other communities in need, and to say, we see you. We want to know you. In knowing you, we are all richer, our connection is deeper, and we can somehow find our way to a better world. Let us, together, be a community that builds those paths for love's loop to become complete in us. Let us encourage and hope and endure through conflict and uncertainty. And let us extend our love into the world, to stand for all the places where it must bloom strongly if justice is to be done and life is to flourish. So may it be.